Everybody ready? Ready?
Yeah.
All right, listen.
It's your weekend show.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
With Bob Biermann.
It's great.
And welcome to your weekend show. I'm your host, Bob Biermann. So glad you're taking some time from your busy and hopefully restful weekend time with me. Each and every week we have the opportunity to come on the radio all across the world on international shortwave, online, and even some domestic radio as well. These past couple of weeks I've been thinking about the wonderful opportunities that we've had and places that this program is now heard. And from time to time over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about some of the radio stations that actually air this program internationally. Of course, many of the listeners know that we are on WRMI, based out of Okeechobee, Florida, and cover pretty much all of North America, Canada, into Europe, just a number of places from that facility. We hear on a regular basis from the United Kingdom and Europe, along with, well, Canada and pretty much the United States. And we're thankful for that voice. We're also heard online on Rackman Christian Radio, on domestic radio, even in St. Kitts and Nevis on Praise FM 99.3. But over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to share some of the stories about some of the places that this program is heard, and I think you'll find it interesting. We are truly honored here at your weekend show for the many places that give the time each week for this program, make it available to us to be heard by you. And I would love to encourage you to take some time this week to let me know that you're listening to your weekend show. And you can do that by looking for our website, which is yourweekendshow.com. That is yourweekendshow.com. That is yourweekendshow.com. And you can even send an email, hear prior programs, and find out more about your weekend show from the website. And of course, you can send an email and it comes directly to me. Just go bob@yourweekendshow.com. That is bob@yourweekendshow.com. And those emails come directly to me. No one else reads them, just me. And I'd love to hear from you. We also maintain a Facebook presence. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for Your Weekend Show. That is Your Weekend Show. And I've learned if you make Your Weekend Show one word, you'll find us right away on Facebook. So maybe leave a message, like us if you would. I'd like to get some more likes, if at all possible, in the next couple of weeks on Facebook. There are times that I wonder if using Facebook is even a wise idea. Maybe you've got some thoughts on that as well. Well, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to be taking a break here. And when I come back from that break, I'm going to be spending some time with a good friend of mine, Ray Robinson, who is with the Voice of Hope. Now, they operate radio stations in the Middle East, in Africa, and even in the United States. And we are currently heard, as many of you already know, on the Voice of Hope in Africa, based out of Zambia. And we hear quite a bit from that facility, and I'm surprised at times, but I'm just honored to be on the radio there. And I can't wait to spend a few minutes with Ray Robinson and share with you some of the exciting things that are happening at the Voice of Hope. And we will do that when we come back right after this break.
On the air and online at yourweekendshow.com.
In today's world, sharing the gospel is getting harder and harder. Being able to learn God's word to be able to minister or share the good news is also becoming more difficult. If you know you have a call on your life and are seeking to get the needed education and preparation for ministry, why not look into the Trinity Graduate School and Seminary? Trinity Graduate School and Seminary exists to glorify Jesus Christ as Lord by preparing adults to evangelize, disciple, and minister to the world. Since 1973, Trinity Graduate School and Seminary has fulfilled its mission of preparing men and women for ministry. Trinity Graduate School and Seminary is accessible to students around the world through an online delivery system. To find out more information, why not visit their website at trinitygraduate.com. That's trinitygraduate.com.
Did you hear that?
What? Don't you hear good?
It's your weekend show with Bob Biermann.
The best in the world.
Ever been misunderstood, misused, and misled? Ever knocked on the sky and had it fall on your head? But don't worry about it. Don't worry. Ever lost your luggage, your marbles, your house?
And welcome back to your weekend show. I'm your host, Bob Biermann. So glad you're spending some of your weekend with me today. Now, we're so excited with all the emails we get from time to time from all over the world. And I'm especially, how should I put it? My heart is especially touched when I hear one or get word that people are listening from the Voice of Hope in Africa, coming to you from Zambia. And on the phone with me right now is Ray Robinson with the Voice of Hope. And I don't want to talk so much about the Voice of Hope in Africa, though I do want to spend a few moments on that. But you've got an exciting project in front of you that I think really needs some attention today. Ray, welcome to your weekend show.
Hey, Bob, it's great to be with you. Thank you for letting me chime in here.
You've had a busy time.
An interesting situation right now.
Yes, you've had a very busy time, I know personally, and you just came back from an overseas trip, and you're at home, and we'll let the listeners know that you are fighting a cold, and I can empathize when that happens. So, our prayers are with you for a fast recovery. First, let's talk about, just for a moment, the Voice of Hope in Africa. What's going on with the Voice of Hope in Zambia these days?
Voice of Hope in Africa is it's doing well, but it isn't built out to the extent that we would like it. Right now, we're broadcasting for 6 hours a day, Monday to Friday, and about 5.5 hours on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. Our vision, our concept for it is for it to be an all-day and 20-hour-a-day type station. We do long-format programming, but we're trying to build, and we need income for the station to be able to sustain it from programmers. So right now we're certainly happy with the reception that we're getting. It was interesting. Our evening presenter, we do a lot of live music presentation. Our evening presenter, Lombe Machalika, was recently on a trip down to Durban in South Africa a couple of weeks ago. And she knew that one of the regular listeners down there, a guy by the name of Daniel Giraud, who may actually be listening to the program today, your program, was in Durban. And so she managed to connect with him and heard, how he listens. He apparently is at work during the mornings. He has a job where he needs to be in the office during the mornings. He usually listens to us by live stream. Obviously, the quality is good on the web stream in the mornings. And in the evenings, he listens on our 4965 frequency, which has amazing coverage. It not only covers Africa, but it reaches into Europe, much of Asia, Western Australia, and South America. It goes all over.
That probably explains some of the Australia feedback that I've gotten in recent months.
Yeah, not infrequently. We do get responses, particularly from the Perth area and Newcastle, places around there in Western Australia. They seem to get us quite easily. We also get responses from the islands in the Indian Ocean, places like Reunion and Mauritius. There are listeners there, even though their primary language is French. There are people who understand English, and they like listening, particularly to the music that's on Voice of Hope.
Now, the Voice of Hope in Africa, you operate 2 different transmitters, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right. We've got 2 continental 100 kilowatt transmitters there.
And 2 antenna systems that each has their own particular target area. And so you're operating currently on 2 frequencies. What are those frequencies you're using now?
Well, we have one antenna it's an interesting design. The whole concept of it is like it beams the signal directly up into the atmosphere, straight up vertically from the Earth, and then it rains back down on the Earth like an umbrella pattern. It's called a vertical incidence antenna, and it basically gives us kind of a donut shape over the whole of Central and Southern Africa. And the frequencies we use on that antenna in the mornings for the breakfast programming from 7 till 10 a.m. Central African time is 9680 kilohertz, and in the evenings it's 4965 kilohertz from 6 to 9 p.m. Central African time. Then the other antenna is a low periodic beam that's focused on West Africa. It's actually directly on Nigeria, but it covers really all of West Africa, and all of the English-speaking countries there can hear us. And we use 11680 in the mornings on that antenna and 6065 in the evenings. And of course, from Zambia up to West Africa, if you follow that trajectory on, it heads into across the North Atlantic, and it hits the New England states and the Atlantic states of Canada, right in line with that. So we get a lot of responses from there too. And 6065 also carries well into Europe. We regularly get responses from Great Britain, the Scandinavian countries, Germany, France, Italy, those kind of countries.
And so that ministry has been
quite widespread.
It's been there for a number of years, correct?
The station was originally installed by Christian Voice, but the transmitters were replaced in 2008, 2009. So they're relatively new machines. And it's a very clean installation there. It's very impressive. I was last there a few months ago, and I was happy to see things running very smoothly.
A couple of things that come to mind just for our audience sake. They hear you talk about the limited number of hours, and it's really not so much for the personnel cost, but electricity cost to operate 2 Continental 100 kilowatts is not inexpensive at all, and probably even more expensive the way you have to do it where you're at in Zambia. Can you give us an idea of what the power consumption is when those 2 transmitters are actually operating?
Well, they're 100 kilowatt units. The local power utility in Zambia is called ZESCO, Z-E-S-C-O, and they have their own challenges. Most of the electricity in Zambia, particularly in the region where we are, is generated from the Kariba Dam over the Zambezi River. The electricity that's generated hydroelectrically there by agreement with Zimbabwe is shared 50-50 between the 2 countries. And so a lot of the electricity is relatively inexpensively generated for Zambia. But the problem is, since they gained independence in the early 1960s, there's not been much money invested in the infrastructure of the electrical distribution grid. And so what we find is, particularly on the weekends, there are frequent power outages that affect our transmissions. So we do have a backup generator. We have a 750 kVA Caterpillar there, but that is very thirsty. Providing that with diesel is quite an undertaking too. So our energy costs are a combination of what we have to pay to the electricity utility and also diesel for the generator. But I would say, even broadcasting just 6 hours a day, we are typically seeing energy bills around $3,500 to $4,000 equivalent per month,
which is quite a bit. So if you're operating 24 hours, you just take that 4,000 and multiply that by a factor of 3 or 4 to $16,000 a month, easy.
Yes, you could. Exactly.
So a lot of people say, well, why don't you just stay on a little longer? Well, there's your reason, and of course, it takes paid programming and people that are investing in the ministry to keep it going. Yet it does have a very important voice in reaching a very critical part of the world, the Voice of Hope in Africa.
We say to broadcasters, that they ask us, why should I broadcast via the Voice of Hope to Africa? And my first answer is always there's such a dire need in Africa for solid biblical teaching. There's a lot of weird ideas being promulgated in different places over there. Yes. And quite frankly, we need solid, grounded biblical teaching. Many people understand English, and even in the areas where they don't, the pastors and the teachers quite frequently can take the best of the ideas they hear on the radio and translate them into local languages for their local congregations. So we're supporting remote pastors from that perspective. But the other thing I say to broadcasters in the States who are considering putting programming on Voice of Hope Africa is that this is a missionary outreach. We're a mission radio network. And what you can say to listeners in the United States is by contributing to these broadcasters, you're helping to spread the gospel in countries that you could never get to normally. Countries that have very oppressive and restrictive governments.
Yes.
Radio is no respecter of international boundaries, and we can get the word to places where missionaries would otherwise be in fear of their life. In places like northern Nigeria, where Islam is so strong these days, it's no joke. And you go into countries like Mali and Chad and so on, that Islam is so strong, and yet we can counter that with the truth of the gospel. And that's what we're trying to do with Voice of Hope Africa.
And I would hope that people that are listening now, but while we have a moment here, before I forget, if they want to find out more on the website about Voice of Hope in general, and we'll talk about some of the other stations and missions you have, but before we forget, where's the best way they can get information about the Voice of Hope?
voiceofhope.com. A lot of information on our website, voiceofhope.com.
All right, voiceofhope.com, and I hope that people will take advantage of that. Now, they could also listen to the Voice of Hope, of course, there. We have 3 stations, and there are live streams for all 3 of them at voiceofhope.com. Wonderful. And, so we've talked about Voice of Hope Africa, where this program airs, and I can't even remember what time it airs on the weekend. I think it's Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, that this program airs. It's Saturday afternoon. I'd have to look it up here, but keep talking and I'll let you know. Well, yes, it's Saturday. I know it's, and I've gotten some response, and it excites me to know that in my little way to produce this program that maybe somebody or even one life is impacted. It's worth it all. It's worth the time. It's worth the effort to do it. And then, of course... Yes, this program goes out from 4 to 5 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, Central African time. That's 1400 UTC. All right. So that's your time slot every week. Wonderful. Now, let's move up the continent into the Middle East and talk about your facility that you have there right now in Israel, and also some opportunity you might have as well. So what's going on with the Voice of Africa in the Middle East? Well, Bob, that is such an exciting station. It is amazing that it even exists. It's been miracle after miracle that has allowed that station to be re-established. What we've got there is a 50,000-watt AM clear channel station that's based in the north of the country of Israel. We have studios on the actually on the beach of the Sea of Galilee, on the southern shore. There's no road or anything in between. We look right out over the Sea of Galilee. And the transmitter site is a few miles north of that, up close to the Lebanon border. And we broadcast primarily in Arabic. There's a few hours a week in English, but mostly in Arabic, wanting to get the gospel into Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. We're reaching out to people who have been displaced because of the civil wars that have been going on there, yes, particularly in Syria. A lot of people in refugee camps. You know, you look down the rows and rows of tents in the refugee camps, and you don't see satellite dishes on the side of the tents. And they don't have internet. But everybody's got a radio. Yes. Right?
And that's what they're listening to. And so we're putting out something that is unique in the Middle East. We're not only the only foreign-owned radio station in Israel, we're also the only evangelical Christian station in the Middle East. That there are a few local FMs. There's one in Bethlehem and there's one in Beirut that do have Christian programming on them, but they're not particularly evangelical, and they're restricted by what the local authorities will let them do. But we've basically been given carte blanche by the Israeli government. The only restrictions on us are that we may not intentionally target an Israeli audience or broadcast in Hebrew. But aside from that, they see that it's in their best national interests to have a gospel of peace broadcast to the people around their borders. And so that's why they're happy to host us. And in fact, they've been so impressed with the programming that's been going out on the AM station, they've now just a couple of weeks ago approved frequencies for us to use from their shortwave station to broadcast in Farsi towards Iran. So
and we talked about that a while back. We talked about that about a year ago, I think, when that possibility.
Well, it was a dream. We were hoping for it, but now the Ministry of Communications Frequency Coordination Committee have actually approved what we need to move forward with that. So they've offered us the use of their former Kol Israel, Voice of Israel, transmitting facility at Yavne, which is south of Tel Aviv, down the coast. It's between Tel Aviv and Ashdod. And we do need to raise funds for a transmitter there. There's a magnificent antenna, but we do need a new transmitter because the old one that was being used with that is now no longer serviceable.
I saw pictures.
Transmitter that we have, it's a brand new unit. It's a Nortel. It's an NX50 solid state. And so we need something equivalent to that will handle the shortwave to Iran.
I'm just trying to think. I don't think anybody's making a shortwave that I know of, maybe in Europe, that's solid state. I know that Nautel is not doing shortwave yet. I wish they would. But they don't. They do a lot of medium wave up to, 400,000 watts now.
Yeah.
But shortwave.
There are some that are available, I think, from Switzerland. We're looking at that.
So what an opportunity, because you're talking about reaching, and a lot of people, a lot of shortwave listeners understand the distance that can be covered by a shortwave signal. For those listening on domestic radio in the States and also online, to realize that you're not talking in terms of 20 and 30 and maybe 50 miles or even 100. In shortwave, you begin to talk in terms of hundreds and thousands of miles of coverage that can be targeted. And a country like Iran, which right now is such a danger to the world, and what an opportunity to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ right into the heart of that region.
Yes, that's right. Iran is really a closed country in terms of opportunities for missionaries to spread the gospel. You can't do that openly really anywhere in the Middle East, but especially not in Iran. The internet is controlled there. People are hungry just for honest news from the outside world.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I was checking, the BBC from London broadcasts in Farsi to Iran, but they're on for 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the evening. So that's it. They're news magazine type programs. But there's such a shortage of information and entertainment even that's not served up by the local mullahs in Iran, and the people are just hungry for it. The language of Farsi is the official language of Iran. It's also spoken by some peoples in Turkmenistan to the north and Afghanistan and Pakistan on the eastern borders. Mm-hmm. It's a huge population there that needs to be served. And we just pray that the Lord will give us the funds to allow this to go forward from Israel. And it's amazing.
What you just said, what you just said before is so telling and so important. about the internet. So many people that I will talk to in the States will think, well, just put it online. The world can get anything online. And the answer is no, they can't. In some places, number one, you may have terrible service, unreliable service, and what service you get is not high speed enough to do any kind of streaming. I mean, literally, you're lucky to get email in some parts of the world if you have internet. Other places like China and much of the Middle East, the content and the websites, they have to be on a white list to be allowed through. Otherwise, you cannot see certain internet sites in Iran or Iraq or anywhere else. I mean, it is highly controlled. You're probably more aware of some of the controls that you see in Africa and also the Middle East than even I am because of the work that your ministry is doing. How bad can it be in a place like Iran, for example?
Well, China is famous for its national firewall. I mean, it locks down the internet so tightly and controls what their people can have access to. It's just something we can't conceive in the West. In Africa, I think it's fair to say that 3G or 4G type cellular coverage is getting more and more widespread. And when you're out in the country regions of Zambia in particular, I know you can still get cell service, which is good. But the reality is the vast majority of people there can't afford data plans that would allow them to do radio streaming or video streaming. I mean, it's just outside of their realm of thinking. That wouldn't even occur to them to do that. But they can use it for voice and text and perhaps email, but that's about it. They wouldn't go beyond that. So when you get outside the major cities, there's so much of a need for shortwave radio. In many of the countries in Africa, they don't use medium wave anymore because in the tropics it's subject to a lot of static. There's FMs in the cities, but that has a range of 80 to 100 miles, and there's thousands and thousands of miles of continent there. You can't really get anything outside of the major cities other than shortwave radio. And when it comes to FM, actually, in talking to some of the operators that I've met and learned over the years, and because I had worked with a manufacturer of equipment, it is surprising that in some of the major cities in Africa, in many of the countries, the towers are only 200 or 300 feet tall. They're not in the thousands of feet, and powers are normally 1,000 to 5,000 watts tops, only giving them a coverage of maybe 15 or 20 miles. I would really strongly agree with that because, in fact, I would say 1,000 to 2,000 watts. I don't think, in my experience in Zambia, I'm not sure there are any stations that are 5,000 watts. There may be perhaps the government station, ZNBC, and the BBC, which broadcasts on FM in Lusaka. But aside from that, I don't think any other station has more than 2,000 watts. They're really community stations because the government doesn't want high-powered broadcasting capabilities falling into the hands of people who would go against the government. And that is a problem. That is a problem. And I've talked to some operators that are in a number of the countries over the years, and I know one that is trying desperately to come up with a way in one of the larger cities that is so underserved with radio. The capital city, which is 100 and some odd miles away, is very well served, but his city of 100,000 only has 3 FM radio stations. That's it. Yeah. And which is an amazing thing because, number one, poverty, the cost, the reliability, the ability of getting the technology and using it is another challenge. Yeah. And radios are ubiquitous. Radios with shortwave on them, you can pick them up in local markets for $20 or less. And as long as you've got a reasonably decent signal, a strong signal, that little radio is going to pick it up. And so pretty much everybody has one of these. Once you get outside of the main cities, they use it as their lifeline. Wealthy people, farm managers, mine owners, people like that, of course, can use satellites for satellite TV. But the ordinary people, they don't even get newspaper distribution outside the main cities. They can't hear FM. They don't get newspapers. What they rely on is their little shortwave radios. And that's the market we're trying to serve.
Once again, you're listening to your weekend show. I'm your host, Bob Biermann. So glad that you're spending some time with me. Just a couple of quick reminders about our website. If you just tuned in, you can find us at yourweekendshow.com. That is yourweekendshow.com. And for those that do have Facebook access, look for Your Weekend Show. Make it all one word, Your Weekend Show, and you'll find us on Facebook. If you'd like to make a comment about the program, why not send me an email? You can send it directly to me, and only I see it. There's no secretary. It's just me. If you send one to bob@yourweekendshow.com, that's bob@yourweekendshow.com, it comes directly to me, and I would love to hear from you. We're talking with Ray Robinson today about the Voice of Hope. We've talked about the facility in Zambia in East Africa that covers pretty much that whole continent and other parts of the world, and also their opportunity in the Middle East. And I want to spend a couple of more minutes on that, and also what you do in North America. What is your real need right now, besides, keeping everything going, and to build out what you'd like to do in shortwave? I just believe the power of what could happen with the gospel of Jesus Christ going into literally the beast of the belly, the belly of the beast with the signal, is what you're doing. And I know that, the prince of the air is Satan himself, and he doesn't like his domain messed with. But what would it take to get that station up and running in the Middle East?
Well, we're so blessed with what we already have there. I'm going to Israel in a couple of weeks' time. I'm leaving California on the 29th of October. So I'm not sure when this particular segment will air, but could be right around now, I suppose. And on November the 1st, a few days later, November the 1st, we're doing a dedication of the station that the Lord has given us in Israel. Voice of Hope Middle East will be dedicated. So it's a special tour that's being run.
Is that the existing AM facility?
That's right, yes.
Which I've seen pictures. They're beautiful.
We've already built the studio for the Farsi service to Iran. It's already built, up and running. All the equipment is there. What we need is a transmitter. And so transmitter cost is, I think it's around $800,000. And then by the time you've added shipping and installation and tune-up and everything, you're probably looking at about $1.5 million. That's what it's going to take to get the Farsi programming off the ground.
Now let's put that in perspective for people here in the United States that listen even on shortwave or online. I can think of a little radio station in a town of, a county of 100 and let's say 200,000 people. A little FM radio station, you want to buy it today, it's over $1 million, probably $2.5 million. So to think that $1.5 million sounds like a tremendous amount, and that station barely reaches 300,000 or 400,000 people. And when you think about it, think of the bang of the buck you're going to get for $1.5 million reaching into whole nations, not just small communities.
And while in America we really don't use shortwave to reach a domestic audience, in Iran, there's going to be an audience hungry for anything that's in their language.
That's not run by the government.
They're being told locally.
That's not being run by the government or the local mullah. That is telling them what they're allowed to have. And understand there are people still alive in Iran that remember the way it was in the early 1970s when there was the Shah, when there was Western freedom and access to information that was just suddenly cut off in the late 1970s. There are people that still remember what freedom is. There are people that remember that there was Christian churches in that country that were literally not being bothered by the government at that time, but it all changed in a revolution overnight.
That's right. The Islamic Revolution in 1979 was so harmful, really, for the the national psyche and the freedom of the people there, that they lost their freedoms overnight. And so many Iranians did leave and come to the West. They emigrated while they could. But there's a lot there now that have just grown up under this, and they don't know anything different.
But they hear about freedom. They hear about these concepts, and they want to find out more, and they know it's not on their internet. They know it's not on their local media in their cities and regions. They can find it coming in from around the world on shortwave. We
have Iranian pastors who are ready and willing to produce the programming that we would need to serve Iran. There's a couple of people here in the States. We have somebody in Israel who's of Iranian background who has some fantastic testimonies and material ready. What we need is the vehicle to broadcast it. So we're very encouraged with the response we've been getting to our Arabic programming, and we probably will put some of that on the shortwave as well, so we could reach the eastern side of Iraq, Baghdad and Mosul and so forth. We want to be able to reach those areas. But we broadcast on AM, the frequency is 1287, and we also do it in conjunction with Facebook Live. So we use social media as well. And what we do is we've got studio cams that we stream to Facebook while the morning live programming is going out. And we encourage people to respond on Facebook. It's kind of interesting. Last week we had a guy wrote in from Egypt because they listen on streaming too. And he said, "Why do you worship a dead man?" So there was a wonderful opportunity to explain what the gospel really is, and the fact that Jesus Christ is alive, he arose, and he's reigning today. But what we found was that other people who were listening started writing in on Facebook as well and explaining to this guy. We didn't even have to do it ourselves. They were explaining to other listeners why we were doing what we were doing. We get a lot of response.
Oh, that is so exciting. That is so exciting.
We get Arabic speakers who respond to us from all across North Africa, many of the countries in the Middle East, and the volumes that we see on our Facebook pages when we do these Facebook Live presentations, they can easily be 15,000, 20,000 people that have commented or tuned in for some period of a 1 hour broadcast. So it's very encouraging. We know that we're meeting a need. We're stirring things up, and they're saying, "What is this? Arabic Christian music? We've never heard this before. What are you doing?"
It's wonderful. Once again, we just want to remind our listeners, this is your weekend show. I'm your host, Bob Biermann, and I have as my guest Ray Robinson with the Voice of Hope. And what a ministry you have with the Voice of Hope. And it's your multiple facilities. We've talked about your one in Africa and your current AM station in Israel, the potential for the shortwave facility reaching even vaster amounts of real estate in that region with the good news of Jesus Christ. But you also have a facility we need to mention before we forget, because sometimes in this country, having a shortwave in the United States almost seems like an afterthought, yet there are millions of those radios here domestically that are in use each and every week. A lot of people looking for different information tend to gravitate to the shortwave because, look, let's face it, even online in this country, as free as we are, the search engines have a tendency to be skewed in certain directions. Let's be honest, they are. We're finding that out more and more every day. And there are people that live in parts of the United States that have terrible internet service. I can think of where WRMI is. You'd think right there in the state of Florida, we are a major facility where this program is heard, and to get decent internet is almost an impossibility in many parts of the United States. It's not universal that you have, decent broadband service. But so tell us about the facility that comes from, I guess it's Simi, California.
That's right. Strategic Communications Group is our organization that runs the Voice of Hope network. And Strategic Communications Group was founded by John and Heather Taylor in the late 1990s. Heather's father, George Otis, was the original founder of the KVOH broadcast station here in California. And we acquired that in 2012 and reactivated it in 2013. Its mission, its purpose, is really to broadcast the gospel in Spanish to Latin America. So although it's based here in the United States, it's about 60 miles or so northwest of Los Angeles, in a place, as you said, Simi Valley is the locale. Its antenna, again, it's a log periodic, it's a very well-tuned beam antenna that's primarily directed at Cuba. So a lot of our responses come from Cuba, but the signal is well heard throughout the Caribbean area. Obviously, it reaches countries like the Dominican Republic and other Spanish-speaking islands in the Caribbean. Puerto Rico is another one. It also reaches down through Mexico, Central America, and the northern coasts of South America, Colombia and Venezuela. We often get responses from Venezuela. So that really is our target area for KVOH. We broadcast in English on that station on Saturdays at the moment. It's only on Saturdays, but that is recognizing that we do have coverage as well into the southern tier of the United States and up the eastern seaboard into New England. And also there's a lobe from the antenna that goes up the west coast of the U.S., up through Oregon, Washington State, British Columbia, a little bit over to Alberta. So we do get responses from there as well. But in the United States, we're finding primarily we're getting responses from DXs and shortwave listeners that are not really that interested in the content of what we're broadcasting. Whereas when we broadcast in Spanish, we are getting responses from Cuba and from the countries of Central America and so on, where they're very much engaging us with the content that they're hearing. And we're very grateful for that.
I know
Go ahead. I was going to say one of our flagship programs actually is a 45-minute call-in talk show called Buenas Nuevas para la Familia, Good News for the Family. And it's run by Pastor Nex Gomez here in Pasadena, California. Mm-hmm. The program goes out on a network of FM stations in California, but they also provide the programming to us. And we put it on daily at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern Time on our Spanish programming from KVOH. And that's probably the most popular program on the station. And like we do in Africa, we also have a lot of live music presentation from our presenters here in studios in California. Lorenzo Martinez and Olga Sanchez are the two main ones that you'll hear during the daytime on KVOH.
I think it was about a year and a half ago, I was out there in California when we had the NASB, the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters. Your facility hosted that in California, and we had the opportunity of seeing your facility. The studios were moved, I guess, to your new place right there in Simi. It had been located in another small building in another part of town. Am I correct?
Yes, we did lease a studio for a while on the premises of a church in Chatsworth. But when we were able to build our own studios it's in a shopping center, a shopping mall.
Beautiful facility.
In Simi Valley. We also have an FM station here as well, community station. And so the studios for the FM and the studios for KVOH and a production studio, they're all located there. And
even a meeting room and stage and everything. It's quite a facility you've put together, in Simi Valley. It was beautiful to see. And I had a wonderful time there. I think, matter of fact, that's the last time you and I were together on a radio show. We recorded it there at that studio a year and a half ago.
That's right. I remember that, Bob. Yeah.
So it's been quite a bit has happened. What are some of the goals or things you're trying to accomplish with the facility in California? I know there's been kind of an ongoing project. Is there anything you can share about what's happening at KVOH?
Well, we're probably going to be launching a new program here. We're talking about it maybe in December or the new year, kind of a behind-the-scenes type program that we would do for either half an hour or an hour live each week. And the intention is that we would broadcast this live from CME on all three of our stations simultaneously. So it'll go out in the Middle East, it'll go out across Africa, and it will go out to everywhere that can hear the signal from KVOH.
Well, that's wonderful.
So John Taylor is very excited about this. We'd like to be able to do that, bring the network completely integrated in that way.
That'd be wonderful. I know there was some work on transmitters occurring up there in California. Anything new on that you can share?
There's still work going on the transmitters. Our trusty old RCA still working very well.
Remarkably well. I mean, it's kind of one of the most unusual shortwave transmitters I've ever seen. And it started its life not here in the United States.
No, it's an RCA, but it was built in Italy originally and originally installed at Vatican Radio. And it did a number of years in Rome there for Vatican Radio. And then they sold it to, if you remember, HCJB.
Yes, I do.
Christ Jesus Blessings down in Quito, Ecuador.
Yes, I do.
It was installed down there and ran for, I think 15 or 20 years maybe, down in Ecuador, until HCJB decided to close down their shortwave operation. And then this transmitter and one other one were purchased by KVOH. They're brought up here to California. This one was installed in California, and the other one was shipped out to the island of Palau in Micronesia, which is where World Harvest Radio now has a broadcast station broadcasting from Palau to China, Korea, Japan, and so forth, countries of East and Southeast Asia. So I don't think the other one out there is still in service anymore, but this one here, it was built in 1959, and it's still running.
and it's been modified to do a few things that it was modified to do a few things differently than originally intended, but it is amazing how well it sounds and it works, and I've heard it. Yeah. And I'm glad that is still there. I know there's another one you want to get up and running, and I know that has been a definite challenge, which unfortunately in this business, a lot of this equipment, the number of people that work on it, it's becoming a little bit less and less as we age out.
That's
unfortunately.
Right. The need for skilled engineers is still a challenge. But yes, we have a 100 kilowatt Harris Gates machine as well that's not currently on the air, but it is actively being rebuilt still, and we're very close to finishing that job. It's been about 3 years or so that we've been working on it.
And that's not surprising at all to take that long, especially to modify it to be more reliable than it was to start with, to work in this other environment that you're now in, and with all the things with DRM coming down the pike. Yeah, there's a lot more than just throwing it together. These things are massive machines.
This machine has been completely refurbished, and it's going to sound better than it ever did. So I'm very encouraged by the work that has been done on it. There's just a few small things left to finish up. Will you be adding any hours or frequencies when that goes on the air? Or you're not sure yet? Possibly. Would be good to be able to relaunch our evening programs on 9975 again. We are thinking about that. But again, it depends on funding. We're not a wealthy ministry. We don't have deep pockets, and there's no big sponsor behind us. So it all depends on broadcasters being willing to help shoulder some of the operating costs. We do have some donors that help us out, make the whole thing possible, but To say this was a shoestring ministry would be a disservice to shoestring.
Yes. Well, Ray, listen, I want to. We're going to be running out of time in a few minutes, and I want to make sure people know how to contact the Voice of Hope, and of course, my thanks to you for allowing this program to be on the station in Africa. It means a lot to me, and it adds a credibility to the work that I'm trying to do. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity. And I want to talk to you at some point about what kind of program could I produce that's maybe different to be of better help in Africa. That's one of the things that has been kind of on my mind of late.
Bob, we're very glad to be able to carry your program. We do get quite a lot of response from people who say, how refreshing to hear somebody that's not hard sell preaching all the time, but just telling life as it is. I think a lot of people can relate to the life stories that you explain. And that is, people in Africa are really on many levels no different than people in North America.
That's right.
They have the same struggles, the same problems with finances and family relationships and all that kind of stuff.
Challenges to faith.
So, yeah, exactly. So I don't think you need to reinvent yourself or the program or become anything different. People like what they're hearing already. So
well, I appreciate that.
Keep on doing what you're doing. Yeah.
And maybe someday, if a slot ever opens and things should expand in California, let me know. We'll just kind of play that one by ear as time goes by. Ray, how can people find out more about the ministry of the Voice of Hope?
Well, I mentioned the website before, voiceofhope.com. If people want to contact us directly, there is a contact form on the website. You could fill that out. Or just email. You can send it to studio@voiceofhope.com, and I see all the emails that come into that address. So
right,
studio@voiceofhope.com for email.
All right, studio@voiceofhope.com, and find out more about that ministry. I think that, how to for those that listen to shortwave, maybe you'll want to see if you can DX it too as well. From wherever you are, you can get a schedule there as well. I think you do have your schedule of when things operate, as I remember being there not long ago. So, Ray,
all three stations have their schedules on the website. The one in the Middle East is in both Arabic and English. The translation is there. In Africa, we only broadcast in English currently. Mm-hmm. And in the States, the KVOH station in California, we have the schedule in both Spanish and English.
Wonderful.
So it's all there.
All right, wonderful. Ray, listen, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with me today to share the vision of the Voice of Hope, and my thanks for being on the Voice of Hope. And my prayer is that your need will be met in Jesus' name for what you're doing, especially in the Middle East, because there is such a need. Islam is such a dark blight on our world. It wants to bring the world into a darkness that only the light of Jesus can overcome. And you're doing it each and every day on the Voice of Hope. Ray, thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us today on your weekend show.
A farmer and a teacher, a hooker and a preacher, riding on a midnight bus bound for Mexico. One was headed for vacation, one for higher education, and two of them were searching for lost souls. That driver never ever saw the stop sign, and 18-wheelers can't stop on a dime. There are 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway. Why there's not 4 of them, heaven only knows. I guess it's not what you take when you leave this world behind you. It's what you leave behind you when you go. That farmer left to harvest a home and 80 acres, the faith and love for growing things in his young son's heart. And that teacher left her wisdom in the minds of lots of children and did her best to give them all a better start. And that preacher whispered, can't you see the promised land? As he lay his bloodstained Bible in that hooker's hand. There are 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway. Why there's not 4 of them, heaven only knows. I guess it's not what you take when you leave this world behind you. It's what you leave behind you when you go. That's the story that our preacher told last Sunday, as he held that bloodstained Bible up for all of us to see. He said, bless the farmer and the teacher and the preacher who gave this Bible to my mama, who read it to me. There are 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway. Why there's not 4 of them, now I guess we know. It's not what you take when you leave this world behind you. It's what you leave behind you when you go. There are 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway.
A song from several years back, Randy Travis and 3 Crosses. You know, I was thinking when I was talking with Ray Robinson just a little bit ago, and also during that song, the little things that we do in life, we've talked about this before, the little things we do in life, the impact we may have on somebody else. We may never know in this lifetime what we have done or said or did that changed the life of somebody else for the better and changed it completely. We may never know in this life the things that we have done for others. And just because we don't know about the things that we've done in this life does not mean that we don't do anything. All the more that we should take advantage of the opportunities when they're out there before us. I do this show each and every week, and the program content may be very different one week to the next, and I never know the influence I'm going to have on somebody's life. I never know. There are times that I have done this radio show and I've thought, no one's going to listen to this particular program. No one's going to care. It wasn't a great show. And then suddenly I get so many responses that people's lives were touched. There are times that I think I've got the best show put together and don't hear from anybody much. We never know, week in and week out, as we produce this program, what the impact and influence could be on somebody else's life. But we keep doing the program. And I hope that if you're listening to this program, you'll take a few minutes and let me know that you do by visiting the website, yourweekendshow.com. If you have access to the internet, yourweekendshow.com. Contact the radio station if you can, that you hear the program, and let them know you listen to Your Weekend Show. Maybe you're one that is listening this weekend on The Voice of Hope. I would love to hear somehow, some way from you. It would mean just ever so much to me. We may never know in this life how we have impacted the life of somebody else. Take advantage of all the opportunities that are out there before you. Not only will they be blessed, but you will be blessed as well. And until next week at this same time, this is Bob Biermann wishing God's greatest blessings upon you.
It's Your Weekend Show with Bob Biermann.